Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. 4 a.m., January 22nd of this year. A 21-year-old Mesa convenience store clerk by the name of Grant Ronnebeck was shot and killed by a man who was in this country illegally, 29-year-old Apolinar Altamirano, who had an extensive criminal history. He should not have been roaming the streets. He was arrested for the murder of Grant. He sits in jail on $1 million bond. But in the wake of this, a family lost a son and a promising young kid. Grant Ronnebeck's father, Steve, is with us today. He's our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Steve, thanks for being here.
Thank you, sir.
First of all, so deeply sorry for your son's loss.
Thank you.
I don't know how a father gets through it.
I'll be honest, I don't know either. One day at a time.
That morning, you were looking at our website.
Yep.
The first inkling you had that anything had happened at a QT where your son worked was on our website?
Well, I had gotten a call from my ex-wife that something had happened at Grant's QT. Had I heard from him? I couldn't find anything out. I tried calling him. I tried calling the store. No answer. And that's when I went ahead and pulled up Fox News. And yeah, that's the very first report that I had seen.
We did not have a name at that time.
No.
Police called you later that day?
No, I actually left work. I told my boss, hey, I got to go.
Did you have a feeling, Steve?
I did. I drove to the QT. And obviously they had the parking lot taped off. I couldn't get in, so I pulled up onto the rocks at the edge of the QT property. And Grant's boss he saw the Jeep pull up and he was already getting out of his car, and at that point I knew.
This is obviously brought to light and again re-emphasized this debate we're having on illegal immigration. When somebody says to you, well, Steve, these people are just coming here for a better life, how do you respond to them?
Some are. Absolutely, some are. But others are wanting, they want to be able to commit crimes and they want to be able to live the high life because they can get rid of them. I mean, they can get away with it, I should say. We have a certain amount of them that are abusing our system. It's not right, it's not fair. They have no right to be here if they're going to commit the crimes that they're committing.
You and I discussed before the program, and I want to get this out there right off the top. You even favor a path to citizenship for people here illegally. You are not a hater.
Absolutely not.
You want to get that out there because people will immediately paint people who bring up this topic as haters.
Absolutely.
Is it not reasonable for the United States of America to say, if you want to be here and you're doing the right thing, we welcome you with open arms. Path to citizenship, we'll deal with that later. You're okay, we're gonna deal with it. You've had a clean record. If you're a troublemaker, we want you out of here. Is that unreasonable?
Absolutely not.
Why can't people talk about this?
You know, we've heard the argument over the years of these people do the jobs that we don't want to do or that nobody wants to do. I'm not a big fan of that attitude. Why are they afraid to talk about it? You know, I can't answer that question.
You get painted as a racist if you talk about it.
Well, and you know, we have such a huge population of illegals in this state alone that, yeah, you can get painted as a racist. So people tend to just ignore the problem like it's going to go away.
You have started something, a push, with Congressman Matt Salmon, who represents you in Mesa. That's where you live. Grant's Law. Tell me about it.
Grant's Law is basically, in a nutshell, that these illegals that commit violent crimes, and it doesn't even have to be violent crimes, these illegals that commit these crimes never see freedom or free soil again. They are, whether they're convicted or not, if they're arrested for violent crime, they are basically, once local law enforcement is done with them, they immediately get taken into custody by ICE. They're put at the top of the list as far as deportation proceedings. That will happen within 90 days. And then they are deported.
And if they return after that?
Well, there's no real law at this point. Matt Salmon is also writing Kate's Law, which deals
Kate
with
Steinle in
yeah,
San Francisco, who we're going to talk about later. Let me take you back before we get into this, and get tape number 2 ready, if you will. 29-year-old Apolinar Altamirano, the young man who killed your son, by all accounts. He hasn't gone through the process yet, but it's pretty clear on the videotape what happened.
Absolutely.
This was over a pack of cigarettes.
Worse yet, it was over Grant wasn't counting change fast enough.
He brought in change that night it was 4 in the morning. He brought in that change in a jar.
Dumped it on the counter. Grant was counting the change. I guess the exchange summed up to be, what, you're not going to give me my cigarettes? Grant responded, I need to count your change. And at that point, he pulled a gun on Grant. Grant offered up the cigarettes. Here you go. And Altamirano went ahead and shot him in the face.
Twice.
I don't know about twice, but I know he was shot in the face.
You lose your son. You know your son's been killed in the convenience store at the QT. He's 21 years old. You're dealing with the stunning news of that, and I'm sure you're numb. When did you first start to learn about who had killed your son?
It was later in the day. The police had come to the house, and they had told me that they did have Altamirano in custody.
Were you asking questions? Who is this guy? Why did he do this?
I wasn't able to.
They were just volunteering it.
They were just volunteering. A little bit later in the day, I had another visit from Mesa Police Department, and that's when, it was let out that he was an illegal.
Did your sadness turn to anger pretty quickly, or were you just still numb with everything?
I was still numb. The anger came a couple weeks later.
I want to take you to tape number 2. This is Apolinar Altamirano, the 29-year-old who has been charged with shooting and killing 21-year-old Grant Ronnebeck. Take a look.
Your full name, please.
The accused killer didn't say much in court, and he kept quiet when he was interviewed by police. But security cameras captured what happened at the Quick Trip near Stapley and Broadway around 4 Tuesday morning. Police say the suspect, 29-year-old Apolinar Altamirano, brought in a jar of change to pay for a pack of cigarettes. As the victim, 21-year-old Grant Ronnebeck, was counting the change, the suspect said repeatedly, "You're not going to give me my cigarettes?" After the victim told him the money had to be counted first, Altamirano pulled out a gun. Court documents show the victim gave him the cigarettes, but police say Altamirano opened fire anyway. The suspect then slowly walked behind the counter, stepped over the victim, and took several packs of cigarettes and slowly walked out of the store. Altamirano pleaded guilty to a 2012 burglary-related charge and had recently finished probation. In court, the prosecutor talked about his immigration status.
Is in the country illegally, does not have status to be here, was given bond by the federal immigration authorities while they had a hearing to see whether he would be deported from the country, and during that period of time is when he committed these, was when we believe there is probable cause that he committed these offenses.
Steve Ronnebeck, Grant Ronnebeck's father, is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Did Grant have any feelings about this whole issue of immigration that you knew of? Did he articulate it ever?
He was kind of like me, that we had talked about it in passing. We never had any in-depth conversations. He knew that they cost the taxpayers money. We provide their health care at times. So there was a general, it bothers us, but again, until it affects you directly, you don't have any feelings towards it.
I want to roll tape number 4. This had happened before Grant's death. This was Brandon Mendoza, a Mesa police officer, killed by a drunk, wrong-way driver. Mendoza's crash became politicized when his mom penned a letter to President Obama. Let's see tape number 4 if we can here. She wrote to President Obama, and she highlighted that her son's killer had been in the country illegally. He had been convicted of a crime in Colorado. Authorities let him go on a lenient sentence. There's Brandon Mendoza. You had heard about this story.
Absolutely.
Before this ever happened to your son. Do you remember thinking about this?
I remember thinking how tragic it was.
Senseless?
Absolutely senseless. Absolutely.
You call these preventable crimes.
Absolutely they are. Absolutely. If and I expressed to you before the interview that you know, people are going to say all murder is preventable, all these crimes are preventable, but in this select area, in this select group, had they not been here, had they been deported, and if they had re-entered, had they been jailed, my son would be alive, Officer Mendoza would be alive, Kate Steinle would be alive.
Steve, have you been political in the past? Have you taken politics very seriously? Because your brother now, I guess it was your brother who testified on Capitol Hill about this exact thing. He was very outspoken about Grant's death.
I never really was political. I am now. I see things that are wrong, especially as far as my son, as far as Kate Steinle, Officer Mendoza. There's a young gentleman named Glovach in Houston that was executed through the window of his car.
In traffic.
In traffic, after he was taking his girlfriend home. Jameel Shaw, another one that was executed in California.
Right.
The two officers in Sacramento.
His father's been very outspoken.
Yep, Jameel Shaw.
Steve, who do you blame for this? What is going on?
Well, you know, the system is flawed. Okay, that's the biggest thing. ICE being overloaded and in some cases not doing what they're supposed to be doing is definitely a problem. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to call out our president that his Dreamer Act and his executive actions are partially to blame.
Well, the word on the street, let's be very honest about this. Basically, right now, the policy stands as this. Unless you are a really serious criminal, you frankly face no threat of deportation right now under the current system where we are right now.
That's correct.
Pretty much, ICE has been told to lay off. Nobody's going to deport anyone unless they are charged with a serious crime. And first of all, they'd have to go through the system here before that would ever happen, right?
That's correct.
So the man who killed your son, tell me a little bit about what he was in for before he was released, because I think people will find this very interesting. He was a very violent man.
He had been arrested for basically kidnapping, sexually assaulting a woman for a week, him and another man, burglary.
Was this a drug deal? What was this? Drug repayment, non-payment?
Drug related, that's all I can tell you. But they raped this woman for a week. Held her hostage, burglarized the apartment. And this was an associate of theirs. This was an associate's girlfriend. This associate's in jail when they did this, okay? And they pled it down to simple burglary, felony burglary. And they released him to ICE. He never did any real prison time. They released him to ICE, which then turned around and granted him a $10,000 bond and let him out.
Did he have gang affiliations, do you know of?
In the one court document that I saw, he was a self-proclaimed member of the Sinaloa cartel and the Mexican mafia.
Not the kind of person you want in your community.
Absolutely not.
Tell me a little bit about the process before we go to break. The prosecutors have shared with you a little bit about this guy. The only thing that they were able to share with me is that he's shown no remorse. None.
None.
We're going to take a break here on Newsmaker Sunday. Steve Ronnebeck, who lost his son, Grant, shot and killed. Grant was working at a QT that I think he'd been working at for several years before this happened. since he was maybe 16 years old. He was 21 years old, shot and killed by a man who was in the country illegally, who basically executed him at 4 in the morning back in January. We're back with Steve and his story and his push to try to fix this as Newsmaker Sunday continues right after this. Back on Newsmaker Sunday. The father of a young man who was murdered, and this is the suspect in the QT shooting. 4 a.m. on January 22nd, 21-year-old Mesa convenience store clerk Grant Ronnebeck was shot and killed by that man who was in the country illegally, 29-year-old Apolinar Altamirano. He had an extensive, violent criminal history. Should not have been in the United States by any measure. Should not have been roaming the streets by any measure. Yet he was, and a young man is dead because of it. Steve Ronnebeck, Grant's father, is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Let's roll tape number 6. This would have been several months after you lost your son. Mm-hmm. We learn about Kate Steinle in San Francisco, this beautiful young woman, shot and killed, again by a guy in the country illegally, who was a total troublemaker, who gets a hold of a gun, and whether it was an accident or not, shoots and kills her. And she dies right before her father out on the pier in San Francisco.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking.
When you hear these stories now, Steve, what goes through your mind? What do you think? And what do you think should be done?
Well, the first thing is it opens that wound over Grant. I mean, it just reopens it. It's just absolutely tragic and heartbreaking that it's continuing. It's not getting any better. It's not getting fixed. It's happening, and it's happening more often. What should be done about it? We need to put a stop to this immigration policy that says it's okay for these people to commit crime and to go back to walking our streets. It's just
a preventable crime.
It's a preventable crime. It's got to stop.
I have to ask you about this. Mm-hmm. Then, a few weeks ago, Donald Trump comes on the scene. This is a protest outside of the convention center in downtown Phoenix. Trump on immigration made this statement when he announced for president. This is a quote. "When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people who have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people." When you heard Trump say that, what did you say? What was your reaction?
You know, I'm going to use a young lady that testified with my brother. I'm going to use her quote, if that's okay. "We were heard."
We were heard.
We were heard. Somebody heard us.
Were you surprised that it tapped into a deep reservoir of discontent among some corners of the electorate who really say, finally someone has got the courage to say, we've got a real problem with this. We've been very accommodating, maybe overly accommodating, especially when it comes to bad apples.
Absolutely, and it's just absolutely wonderful that some of these lawmakers are now standing up and they're saying enough is enough.
Are you kind of cheering for Donald Trump in this thing?
You know, I haven't picked anyone as far as who I'd like to see win.
But he's at least raised an issue that for many had kind of gone off the radar.
Oh, absolutely, and it completely did go off the radar until Kate Steinle. Some of this had been swept under the rug, and even you didn't hear about the young man in Houston that was killed shortly after Grant was. That's the policy, trying to keep it from coming out. So Donald Trump absolutely brought this to the forefront. He has made this an issue to get addressed.
Have you talked to Kate Steinle's family? Have you talked to Brandon Mendoza's mom? Is there a group of you who kind of commiserate about this failed policy?
I have not had a chance to talk to the Steinle family. My brother has. I have had a chance to talk to Mrs. Mendoza. There's a group called the Remembrance Project that got us together about a month ago. Just a wonderful group of people. And they're all about this problem.
We have a little time after the break, but I want to give you a moment to talk about your son. Tell me about Grant.
Grant was, he was just one of those kids that did anything for family, did anything for friends. He, and I didn't realize it until his funeral, that he had so many people that loved him and that he had touched so many people. We had gotten messages from just simple customers of QT that your son would brighten my day. Even if I was having a bad day, your son could make me smile.
Grant also, as I heard during the memorial, would take care of customers sometimes who couldn't pay the bill.
You know, I don't know. I've heard that that was true.
It doesn't surprise you?
No. No.
Do you believe that these efforts politically will bear fruit? The work with Matt Salmon that you're doing to try to pass Grant's law and change some of this madness?
I have to believe it. It's my way of honoring my son. Not too many people know, but Grant was actually paying about 1/3 of our household bills to give me and Grant's brother a little bit, make it easier, give us a little bit better life and make things a little bit easier for us. So obviously I can't repay him monetarily, so this is how I need to repay him.
We're back with Steve Ronnebeck, who lost his son Grant in a senseless, preventable killing at the QT in January in Mesa. We're back on Newsmaker Sunday in a moment. Final thoughts from Steve Ronnebeck, who lost his son Grant in that QT shooting. A young man in the country illegally with an extensive criminal record, killed his son, shot him in the face over a pack of cigarettes. What should happen to this guy now?
Well, justice, obviously.
What would that be? What would justice be, Steve?
Well, you know, the consensus is that the death penalty is on the table.
It's a senseless, depraved, merciless killing.
Yeah. And
premeditated.
And premeditated was the big thing. So the death penalty is definitely the general consensus.
He's shown no remorse.
Not a bit.
Do you blame him or the politicians for allowing this to happen? Both.
Absolutely both.
Do you believe we're entering a point in our country where we're going to actually deal with this issue? Do you think we're getting to a critical mass where something has to give?
Absolutely we are. It has to happen. Something has to happen. You know, we're going to be pushing overpopulation in the next 50 to 100 years. We have to do something.
And I want to put it on the record again. You're not a hater.
Nope.
Never were. You even favor a path to citizenship for people who are here illegally.
Absolutely.
You're just saying when there's a criminal element, you got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And maybe as a nation, we have the right to be selective about who we do admit and who we don't admit.
Absolutely, we do. Absolutely. These criminals are people that we don't need. They aren't productive in our society.
30 seconds. What would you like to tell folks out there? I want to give you the floor.
This is something that can happen to anyone. You always dread that knock on the door in the middle of the night that one of your children may be hurt, so on and so forth. What I'd say is keep hold of the loved ones, keep them close. If you'd like more information on Grant's Law, HR 2942, you can go to YouTube and see the press conference with me, Matt Salmon, and Sheriff Arpaio. Kate's Law, there's also a video on YouTube for Kate's Law. I'd really like it if somebody would take a look at it.
Steve, thank you for being here. I'm so sorry for the loss of your son.
Thank you, sir.
We'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday.